John, there's a lot of bad moments in the history of the Mets. This feels like it could be the top one because of what the competition is and how many teams make the playoffs and taking Soto from the Yankees and bringing back Alonso and bringing up Nolan McLean, who looks special, and they might miss the playoffs.
If they don't make it, this is worse to me.
John, sometimes you have to send out the bat signal for just the perfect guest. And with the Mets in a tremendous fall, we called on Howie Rose.
Absolutely perfect. The Mets fan, historian, a legendary broadcaster. He knows it all. He's seen it all. And we never had him on previously. We've had on Keith several times. We've had on Darling several times. And how he can assess what's going on with the Mets. And it is not pretty.
It is not pretty. We're going to ask him about the not pretty, put it in some historical context. We'll ask him about job security for a bunch of people. What do you think Alonso's future with the Mets looks like or doesn't look like? John and I will discuss this Mets free fall at the top of the show. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, I've used an analogy before from the movie Rounders, the opening scene when Matt Damon sits down. I was about to say Johnny Damon. Wow, I'm losing it. When Matt Damon sits down, Mike McD in the movie, and he kind of lets you. He says, "If you haven't figured out who the sucker is at the table in 30 minutes, you're the sucker." Right? And I was at the Met game on Sunday, John, and the Nationals are a terrible team playing terribly, and the Mets are in the midst of losing two out of three to them. And I'm like, well, maybe the Mets are the suckers too. The Mets have the 26th best record in the sport since June 13th. The Nationals are 27th. It's a game behind the Mets for about an 87 game period, so more than half a season. Is it just possible that the Mets aren't that good? And by the way, I just want to throw this in. I'm sorry, John. If that Jon Heyman has been telling me the Mets are in trouble longer than I've been willing to believe it. And so I want to give you credit for that, John. I kept thinking they're going to get over this. They're going to get over this. They're going to get over it. And you were much more in my ear of, Joel, there's stuff, real stuff wrong here. So I'll give you the floor.
Well, that's very nice of you because in June and July, I was saying they were better than the Yankees, but I have been with the Mets more than you have, and you've been with the Yankees more, and there's something wrong with this team. I mean, I don't know how it gets saved now. Maybe they sneak in and get to play two or even three games in Los Angeles this season. Presumably, if they don't make it, which is 50-50 now, Fangraphs is finally coming around to the way I was looking at it. And if they get in and bow out to the Dodgers, because right now, even a 2 out of 3, I would be shocking if they won that series. This year is a disaster. Even if they somehow get through that and then lose the next round, to me, it's still a disaster. We had really high hopes for after one. Soto was signed. Pete Alonso was brought back. $340 million was spent. Sean Manaea was brought back. I mean, this season, it is shocking what's going on, but it's been going on for a long time. So maybe the shock has worn off. They're not very good. I mean, that's the bottom line. Maybe they get in, but they got too many issues and they don't have a ton of excuses. I know that they maybe had more pitching injuries than most, but their three greatest players, their three superstars, they play every day. That's been their history. And I mean, not a surprise that they do. They're three tough guys who play when they're not 100% and give Lindor, Soto, and Alonso credit and them for having them. But overall, there isn't really a great excuse. They're now only 4 games ahead of the Marlins. They're basically a 500 team. And as you mentioned, over 87 games, they're a poor team.
John, you mentioned the 4 guys at the top of the lineup who are all on paper having above average offensive years. So I find it almost impossible. It's just one thing that the Mets have not won a single game this year that they trailed going to the ninth inning. It felt like that was going to end Saturday against the Nationals, and it didn't. And I was talking to a Met person yesterday, Sunday, and I said, and we were talking about that. And he said, that starts off as like a random event. But then it happens so often and you guys start asking about it, and it becomes part of the psyche of the team. And so what starts off at random is now actually embedded. I think that they're struggling in big spots because it's on their mind. And it does make me think, so am I going to be the optimist here? That no one would believe that. Where if they could win a game from the ninth inning sometime in the next couple of days, it almost would feel cathartic, like some air coming out of this tension balloon. Because I still feel like I don't believe Cincinnati's going to run the table. I don't think Arizona's going to run the table. The Mets have a chance here if they just play a little better. I still think they're better on paper than these other teams. And I bet you, you talked about the Dodgers. I bet you the Dodgers probably want the Mets because the Reds could at least throw Hunter Green and Lodolo and Abbott. Now that's if they don't have to play to Sunday and they could actually line it up. And the Mets, if they had to go through the weekend and McClain couldn't start, say, one of the three games, or they were all messed up. To your point, the Dodgers would be overwhelming favorites anyway, but then it would become something else. John, I just feel like they need a win where a ball falls late in the game and takes some stress off of them because they believe it all now.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that they're too passive. They've let this happen. They're a bunch of nice guys. I don't see any, negative passion. They're when they have a win, they're all happy. They pose for the camera. They do the little second base celebration nicely. They're very pleasant. I mean, they've been hit by a pitch a lot. There's a lot going on. They've lost a lot here. I mean, they had the best record in baseball, and they are now not even in playoff position, and they're losing to a team that is certainly not ready for prime time, at least in my opinion. You may differ on that. I know they have good starting pitching, but Arizona sold three-star players. They've had an incredible number of injuries. They do not have a real pitching staff. I mean, to me, this is a bigger disaster than there are other disasters if they don't make it at all. But to me, I think they need edge. They don't have enough edge. They got too many nice guys or something. Last year it felt like they were a great comeback team last year. And I understand Iglesias hasn't been great, although the Padres say he's done some good stuff for them, even if the numbers won't tell you that. I understand, and no one's going to regret that Iglesias and JD Martinez and the other guys they didn't bring back, they aren't world beaters at this point. Quintana, I mean, Winker was out for the year. He's got edge. It feels like somehow this clubhouse mix didn't work because on paper, this team shouldn't be in competition with the very, very young Reds and the sold off Diamondbacks. And before that, up until a couple days ago, the Giants, who also sold and aren't a great team either. It is really a sad state of affairs. And to me, they just let it happen to them.
Yeah, I watched the Mariners over the weekend, and you could argue the two best hitters for the Mariners over the weekend were Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor, who they got from the Diamondbacks. And that the Diamondbacks could still be in it after that, and Merrill Kelly, who's been pretty good with Texas, etc. Like I can't believe that this is the pool of teams that the Mets are swimming with at this time. John, it's because of that. I've been a little bit of a broken record on this, and I'll throw it out to you what you think. I get blowing a 7-game lead with 17 to play is historic, but we have seen other teams blow late leads like in the waning days of the season. And I would keep in mind if there were three wild cards in 2007, the Mets make the playoffs. And I'd remind you the 2007 Phillies were at least great. They were just starting a 5-year run as the best team in the National League. They had tons of players who were
Yeah.
going to end up on the Hall of Fame ballot because they're special players. These Reds, these Diamondbacks don't look anything like the Phillies. There's 5 good teams in the National League. All you had to do was be the sixth. They're not competing with the Phillies. They're competing for a third wild card with the Diamondbacks and Reds. And this has been happening in slow motion for 3.5 months, and they haven't put a stop to it. They haven't put their foot on the gas pedal. John, there's a lot of bad moments in the history of the Mets. This feels like it could be the top one because of what the competition is and how many teams make the playoffs and taking Soto from the Yankees and bringing back Alonso and bringing up Nolan McLean, who looks special, and they might miss the playoffs.
If they don't make it, this is worse to me. And I mean, the reason these teams sold is it looked like the Mets were a shoo-in for the playoffs. Nobody saw them coming back to the pack like this. They were a half game ahead of the Phillies at the trade deadline. And then the Phillies, I mean, obviously blew them away. It's not even close. And now they're competing with teams they shouldn't be competing with. The Diamondbacks, if they hadn't had all these injuries and they kept all their players, they'd be a pretty good team. But all that happened to the Diamondbacks, and they're still hanging right there. The Reds, to me, they're way too young. They're just not a team that should be in this mix at all at this point. And maybe, obviously they have Francona there. That's a nice plus, certainly. But I mean, it's really embarrassing, and that's why I say I can't believe no one has stood up and said, other than stop saying that we have the talent in the room and that we're grinding and all that. Say this is awful. I can't. It's shocking. We have only ourselves to blame. This is terrible. Let's get going. Something like that. Not once. We don't hear that once.
John, the other thing I've been thinking about a lot, and we had David Stearns on a couple of weeks ago, and he gave a vote of confidence to Carlos Mendoza, and I saw David over the weekend on Sunday at the ballpark in the dugout before the game, and I asked again, and he reasserted Carlos Mendoza is doing a very good job. Look, I don't think I know you hate when I do this. The Knicks went to the Eastern Conference Final, and we none of us saw Tom Thibodeau, I think, being bounced. And so, like, you never know what begins to happen in mid failure, unexpected failure. And so maybe something will happen with a manager, a pitching coach, a hitting coach, not bringing back Alonso or Edwin Diaz because you feel like you have to change up the. John, I just wonder, few people follow off-season maneuvers like you and have a good feel for it. This is not going to go without a scapegoat or three. What do you think if this week goes terribly for the Mets? What do you think happens here?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there will be scapegoats, but I think they need to change the mix in that clubhouse for sure. I mean, certainly not Edwin Diaz. Let's not touch him. He's got nothing to do with the bad chemistry, and he's the one pitcher who's been good from beginning to end. So you need more relievers, if anything. Um, I would change the mix in that clubhouse. I would consider trading guys. I know maybe some people will disagree. I would probably trade Alvarez. I would probably try to trade McNeil. I would try to trade several players. I would not, I would definitely look at changing the mix in that clubhouse. I'm not picking on any one particular player. Obviously, Lindor is not going anywhere. Soto's not going anywhere. I think Beatty has improved. Nimmo is not going anywhere. There aren't a lot of options to change that mix. I would get a veteran catcher and somebody else. My opinion. Obviously, I give Alvarez credit. He's a tough guy. He's playing with 8 fingers. He's went down, didn't complain, came back, improved. I think he's got trade value. That's where I would start. I'm not sure who to blame in terms of the coaches or whatever, but certainly if this collapse goes through, I'd be shocked if they kept the whole staff exactly as is. Now I'm going to take Stearns at his word, and we all think Mendoza is terrific, and I think he'll survive. I generally think if there's a collapse, the manager should go. You need to change the narrative. In this case, he was so great last year. I do believe in him. I would not let him go, my opinion, but I definitely would change the mix in that clubhouse. That's what I would do.
So you're talking about who would go. I'm going to throw out one thing, and again, I'm worried about aggregation, so I want to say I've
Yeah.
heard nothing. I've heard nothing. This is something I've been thinking about recently. And the answer could be with Steve Cohen's money, just take it all. But John, if you were in charge and you were trying to change the mix and the attitude, would you rather have Pete Alonso at first and whatever combination at third, the Vientos Beatty thing, or would you rather have Vientos in first and Alex Bregman at third and bring in Alex Bregman's attitude and feistiness and baseball IQ to this group?
I mean, that's an interesting question. You know, I, and it is possible it could happen. I think Bregman will end up going back to the Red
I
Sox.
agree with you.
Sox are
but
Even though
I'm
he's
trying
only
to
been
think.
there 1 year,
Yeah,
and Alonso's been a lifelong loyal Met,
yeah,
I could say flip a coin on whether Alonso will come back because we've seen that play out for last year, right? And they barely got him back. I mean, at the end, Steve Cohen kind of rescued that. So I could see that one going either way. I do think Bregman will be back with the Red Sox.
so do I.
I wouldn't rule anything out in terms of. I mean, like Diaz, to me, you gotta bring it back. You need the closer, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and obviously, there are guys on long-term deals who are stars. They're not going anywhere. So, I'm not going to say that they need to do this. They need to bring this guy back. And Alonso was on with us. He's had a great year. He's incredibly tough. I don't see him as the problem. He certainly deserves a long-term deal. I think they need to change the mix. However they do it, they need to change the mix. And certainly it's not going to be Lindor, Soto, or Nimmo. Um, you know, they need to get better pitching too. That's another. They need to fix the pitching. That's probably a bigger problem. But I'm not going to go on here and say they have to bring Alonso back at this point. Although he's been great this year and he's a great Met and all that, and the fans want him back. There's a lot of good reasons to bring him back. But my number one thing right now, other than fix the pitching, is got to change the mix.
Well, the reason I brought up Bregman is I think there's very few players who do what you're saying anymore in the sport. And I think Bregman is one of those guys who changes the attitude, the temperature in a clubhouse for the positive. I think he's a like it.
Fantastic. I
I,
agree. And he's
I,
perfect. He's perfect for Boston.
I
So
agree. I think
I don't see
Boston
how
will
they
bring
let
him
him leave.
back.
Yeah.
That's why I got up in the
Yeah.
front of this. I know it won't stop the aggregation idiots from doing what they do, but I was just saying, if you're going to change the mix, let's not only talk about who would leave, who's
Right.
somebody who would change the temperature of your clubhouse for the positives. John, let's throw in one last thing here. It will be about the Yankees. The Mets and Yankees both kind of nosedive starting the same date, June 13th. And to the Yankees' credit, I know everybody always wants to fire the manager, the GM. They've pulled it together. They've since early August, they've had the best record in the major leagues. They are pretty close to sealing a playoff spot. They're in a pretty good position considering where they are and who the competition is for the next 6 days to possibly get the number one seed for the wild card, which means hosting 3 games against, take your choice, Boston, Detroit, Cleveland, whoever ends up there. John, I think it speaks positively to the Yankee culture. We keep waiting for the Mets to overtake the Yankees and make this their town. I've thought a few times in the last whatever quarter of a century was going to happen. I really did when I was watching Jeter and A-Rod get old and I watched Reyes and Wright come in. I was like, the Mets are just about to. And I've had a couple other ones, and I thought this year was another time where this dynamic might switch and the Mets might become the dominant team. But here are the Yankees with what, a 35th is it straight winning, whatever they are, 33rd, 34th straight winning season. They've played 28 mathematically eliminated games in 33 years. Here they are again. They're going to go to the playoffs and they're going to have at least a home run puncher's chance of doing something there.
Yeah, one thing the Mets did, Steve Cohen and the rest did, was they raised the interest level. They did draw a lot of fans. They had trouble with that a year ago. Obviously, the great start helped, the great finish at the end of last year helped, but certainly signing Soto, bringing back Alonso, who talked some about, certainly does help in terms of the fans. But yeah, I mean, the Yankees are the team. I mean, I guess the Mets had moments in the late 80s, right, where they were more the team than the Yankees. It hasn't been a complete wipeout. There have been a couple years where the Mets were a little bit ahead, but I mean, give the Yankees credit for consistency. They make the playoffs 90% of the time. I know they haven't won the big one since '09, but they certainly righted the ship. I could see them certainly at least making the World Series, although I do believe that Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and the Dodgers are the 3 most likely World Series winners. I still think the 3 best teams doing it. National League hasn't turned out exactly like I thought, but the 3 best teams I think are in the National League. But in the American League right now, Seattle's playing the best. They're the only team that's never even made the World. Even the Rockies made the World Series. They never even made the World Series. So they're the biggest threat, I think, to the Yankees right now. The Yankees have very good starting pitching. They have more home run ability than anybody else. I could easily see them making the World Series once again. So yeah, we've knocked on them. At least I've knocked on them quite a few times this year, and let's give them credit. They're still pretty darn good.
Yeah, I've knocked on them plenty for the last couple of years. And yet, like in New York sports, they're the team that has a shot every year. The last two Sundays, the Mets, Giants, and Jets are 0 and 6. The Yankees are 2 and 0. It looks for sure like the two football teams won't be going to the playoffs again. And we'll see about the Mets
You're giving up already, huh?
in the Mets next. Well, those two teams, the two football teams, I guess, are owned by. I know the Jets are owned by a clown, and I guess the Giants have won some Super Bowls, but I would say that's because they had two historic coaches in Parcells and Coughlin overcoming inept ownership. You can't be this bad for this long and have good ownership. That's it's
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I do find it entertaining that Daniel Jones is now a superstar
yes,
after being cut or
yes,
basically.
and last year when Saquon Barkley got blocked for it was amazing what happened for him also. So look, things have gone badly for the Mets recently. Somebody who is going to help us put it in perspective, we think is the perfect guy. Howie Rose will join us next on the show. John and I are so pleased on short notice to be joined by Howie Rose, lifelong Met fan, involved in the broadcast of the Mets since 1987, doing play-by-play since 1995. Howie, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
My pleasure, Joel. John, how you guys doing?
Great. Howie, that long list of what you've done makes you the guy we turn to for perspective here. We're watching an unfortunately familiar tone to a Mets season, which is downturn, disappointment. I'm going to dare say, and I wonder what you think, this would be more disappointing than 2007. Because 2007 to me happened to a Phillies team that would prove itself to be an elite team for those 5 years. They'd win the championship the next year. 2009, they'd go to the World Series. And like if there were three wild cards, the Mets would have made it. This is three wild cards after you get Juan Soto, and you're not losing out to the Philadelphia Phillies of 2007. You'd be losing out to these Reds or these Diamondbacks. What say Howie Rose, who knows this situation much better than I do?
Oh, well, I think if you're just going to ask a fan who experienced both seasons, which they think is the more severe collapse, it depends on their tolerance for reflux, really, because you go back to 2007, that came in a relatively short spurt. This has been going on, truthfully, for just about 3.5 months now. And I was speaking to a member of the Mets after the game yesterday, meaning Sunday, before we left for Chicago. And I won't tell you who it was, but uniform personnel who said, you know what? This is who we've been since June. Now, for me, in terms of just my opinion as to, and again, we don't know how this last week is going to turn out. The Mets may still find their way in, and who knows from there. But I think that to me, 7 up with 17 to go. I don't care who overtakes you. That's almost impossible. 7 up with 17 to go. This has been fomenting since the middle of June. And it's easy, I suppose, to kind of look at where the problems lie, what the trends have been, and extrapolate from that the likeliness or unlikeliness that it gets turned around. So to me, if you're telling me pick one, which would be worse, I still go with 7 up with 17 left.
Well, that was almost impossible. This has been pretty shocking for some of us. I didn't anticipate this. What's your perspective? Did you have any inkling? I mean, didn't you think? I mean, even before they were 45 and 24, that this was quite a good team. Certainly, they spent $340 million. I mean, did you see any signs of this happening? Aren't you shocked like the rest of us?
Absolutely. And don't forget, when they were, what was it, 45 and 24, we were all wondering when the real Juan Soto was going to emerge, right? And he's done that, and he's been one of the handful of best players in the entire game for the last, let's say, month or 6 weeks. So that in and of itself should, in part, mitigate this. But it hasn't, because the problems that we couldn't have necessarily foreseen as recently as mid-June have manifested. The starting pitching has been, to me, the biggest reason because not only has the starting pitching in and of itself not been anywhere close to what it's been. Remember now, the Mets staff led the major leagues in earned run average as recently as late June. They led the National League in earned run average as recently as late July. So there's clearly been a cumulative effect that all of those short starts had on the bullpen. And the bullpen, even back then, in my opinion, was not equipped to handle the load that they've been asked to handle over these last really 3.5 months. So, if you were looking for cracks, I would say you would look at the starting pitching first as recently as mid-June.
You hit a lot of defining points. I'm going to take you to the sixth inning on June 12th. Pete Alonso throws the ball high. Kodai Senga reaches for the ball. At the
Mhm.
moment Kodai Senga reaches for the ball, the Mets are up 4-0. He has a 147 ERA and is the National League Cy Young frontrunner at that moment. By the time he comes down, he's hurt his hamstring, and the Mets have the fourth worst record in baseball since then. And their starting pitching has, I think, the fourth worst ERA. Can a singular injury to kind of a pseudo ace really have done this to the New York Mets?
I don't think so because I don't believe that they're that fragile psychologically. I do think that there are a lot of question marks about the starting pitching going into the season. And that's before Sean Manaea went down. That's before Frankie Montas went down. The question would be not even so much when would any, let alone three of their best pitching prospects, find their way into the rotation, but, which of the starting pitchers who projected as their group of five to begin the year would be able to perform up to expectation. Senga certainly was, but I can't lay it at his feet or that event as the singular reason why the deck of cards started to fall.
At this moment, this season is, at least in my mind, a disaster. Yet they are still in it. What would they have to do for this season to be remembered fondly? And what are
Well,
the chances of that?
Well, for openers, win one more game than the Cincinnati Reds this week. I mean, that's a mandate now, given where they're at with the Reds owning the tiebreaker. For it to be considered a successful year, and you could look at the payroll and say that anything short of a pennant or world championship is a disappointment based on the payroll. I'm not even going to grade them against that curve. I'm going to say if they get in, and if they can find a way to win a series or two and perhaps get at least as far as they did last year, then you look back and you say, how the heck did all of this happen? Um, and I can't rule out the possibility because all three of us have been around long enough to have seen a lot of strange things that didn't make sense on the surface. But, when you look at how they've gotten here since the middle of June, it's difficult to project as far ahead as they got last year and expect a replay of that.
Howie, look, you've lifelong New Yorker, you've been around baseball for your entire professional life. If this goes badly this last week, I can't imagine that they're just going to line up and be the 2026 Mets and look a lot like the 2025 Mets. I wonder what you think. We all kind of thought that David Stearns had helped change the narrative around the team and Carlos Mendoza and Steve Cohen's money. And now we're wondering, like, is Alonso going to be back, or do they say, nah, let's break this up? Is Mendoza going to be back? Is Jeremy Hefner going to be back? Is Eric Chavez going to be back? I don't want to be a scapegoater, but I wonder what you think about this team surviving in some form for next year if this last week goes horribly.
It's pretty interesting because I think this is where you can draw a correlation between '07 and its aftermath and try to answer the questions based on history. There were people who felt after the collapse of '07 that the Mets needed to make a managerial change. Now, I'm going to admit something, and I've said this for as many years as I've been on the air. I feel that it is way too easy to scapegoat a manager. And to me, managers don't get fired because the strategic moves they make don't work out unless there are extreme circumstances. Grady Little might be one. But, I think by and large, managers get fired when they lose the room. And I've not seen any evidence that Carlos Mendoza has, quote, lost this group, however you evaluate what it takes for a group to tune out its manager. And I go back to 2007, I felt the same way about Willie Randolph. but there were a lot of people who felt that something had to be done. You could not come back in '08 with the same cast and expect the same leadership group and the same, 25, 24, I guess it was 25 back then, to simply come back and give it another crack. So I sure hope that it doesn't cost Carlos Mendoza his job if they don't get to the finish line, because I think most of us would agree that Carlos has done a really, really good job. David Stearns has said so. We haven't heard from the owner because if this thing doesn't get across the finish line, that's kind of a wild card here. We've not seen how Steve Cohen would react to something of this magnitude. I hope it doesn't cost the manager his job, because I am so, so fond of Carlos. But you know what? When something like that happens, those questions are asked, and maybe some of it depends on exit interviews that upper management does with players, and maybe they kind of read into some of those answers and act accordingly. But all I could say is, if this doesn't work out, whether it's a pound of flesh or significant personnel moves, something's going to be done of a significant magnitude, in my opinion. What that is, I can't tell you.
And we had David Stearns on several weeks ago. They weren't
Right.
doing great, and we appreciated the fact that he came on when they weren't doing great. They weren't doing this bad, but they certainly weren't doing great. And he said that Carlos Mendoza was doing a great job, and he would be back. And he repeated that to Joel yesterday when Joel asked him. So I'm going to take him at his word. But what are your thoughts on just the overall tenor of the team, the clubhouse? I mean, my feeling is it's a lot of nice guys. They're kind of letting this happen to them, though. I have not seen anybody really lash out. I get the same story every time. We're very talented. We're trying hard, and we have control of our destiny. It's those three things. Now they don't have control of their destiny, but shouldn't somebody have gotten mad at this point? They've been hit by pitch more than just about everybody else as
Mhm.
well. I'm not advocating for violence, but it seems like they're letting it happen, and that's my opinion.
Well, I think there might be a message there because it's hard to disagree with what you've said, but the personality of the team is what it is. And sometimes I think that if a player tries to step out of character, that becomes very transparent. And maybe therein lies the problem. Maybe this team doesn't have that extra degree of passion that it needs to overcome this. I don't know. I do know that it's a what it seems to me, and you guys know this as well as anyone, we, meaning the media, are more segregated from the players now, certainly than at any time since I broke into the business. And you guys remember how much more accessibility we had back in the day. I think it's the same with most clubs nowadays. I mean, just everything about the model of uh, in-game or day game preparation have changed, whatever. But I don't feel that I can responsibly say that I've got a strong feeling on the pulse of the group, because I don't think I'm around them enough to be, an authority on that. But I just have to kind of lean on my own senses and acknowledge that it's a group that seems to get along, that does not have any deep inherent problem. But I think from a motivational standpoint, and a personality standpoint, what you're looking for, whether it's a rabble rouser or just someone with a strong enough personality, might be missing. And there's nothing you could do to cure that in the next week.
Look again, Howie, there's so many reasons to have you on, and perspective and caring about the team and its history is part of it. Pete Alonso heard an ovation when he came to bat yesterday on Sunday, and
Mhm.
also when he was pinch run for by that group of fans who understood that even if they make the playoffs, the games are going to be someplace else, and unless they advance to the division series, that again would be Pete Alonso's last game, possibly as a Met. Now, he handled it great in the post game by saying, if I had a nickel for every time I was asked if this was my last game at Citi Field, I'd be a rich guy. He is a rich guy, no matter
He's
what
rich.
happens. Yes, he's a rich guy, no matter what happens. Does it, speaking at for Met fans in general, does this, if this again goes, last year, the home run off of Williams made it more incumbent on the Mets to bring him back,
Mhm.
I think. If this goes badly, do you think Met fans can do, even after he became the home run leader? Okay, let's change the narrative of the picture a little, and the easiest way is with the first baseman.
Well, if you heard the ovation, and obviously you did, I think the fans have clearly spoken. If you go on social media, see what they have to say, the overwhelming majority of the fans want him back. Now, the discussions we had last year centered around what kind of a deal do you give a guy who's going to play this season at age 30 when metrics and analytics suggest that there are going to be changes in bat speed and all the various tools that they have now to assess how performance is likely to potentially decline in year 2, 4, 5 of a long-term contract. I think that a lot of those same metrics come into play again, but there is an emotional component here. And I think if you were to extract Pete for the sake of this conversation, what are you replacing him with? Because you're talking about roughly 40 and 120 that you've got to substitute. And that's just not an easy thing to do. So I'm so fond of Pete and what he's meant to the organization. It's hard for me to say that I would do anything but advocate for his return. It depends on how much Scott Boras feels he's going to have to make up for what they didn't get last year. He won't have the qualifying offer attached, and that should widen his market somewhat. But I just think that there's a match here that Pete is the Mets to a large extent, and the fans want him to remain a Met. Now, I can't speak for David Stearns and Steve Cohen. I think they spoke last year to the reality that they acknowledge that, and they found a way to do it at least in the short term. And again, just this is just from an opinion standpoint. I hope they find a way to figure it out again. I'd love to see Pete play his entire career here.
I know you don't have the answer to this as you've acknowledged, but what do you think? Just you're around, you know, you hear things. You saw what went on last year and how long it took. He is having a better year this year, so presumably he'll have more choices than he had last year. Uh, what's your hunch? Do they bring him back?
Yeah, my hunch is they find some middle ground there. Maybe, again, I'm just talking off the top of my head here. Maybe Pete and Scott are focused on a 5-year deal, and perhaps they're going to be stubborn and adamant about it. Again, he'll play next year at age 31. There's uncertainty about 2027, of course, because of the labor situation. And I don't know how teams are going to react to long-term contracts this upcoming offseason based on the specter of 27 being at least partially shut down. I can't speak to that. But again, maybe Pete and Scott in their mind right now are thinking we got to get that big 5-year deal. Maybe there's a 3-year deal out there for the Mets that makes sense, whether there are opt-outs or not. That's between Steve and Scott. And thankfully, they have a pretty good relationship. And if all parties do want to maintain the status quo, then I have confidence they'll do that.
Well, if status quo is the highest dollar, they'll maintain that status quo. Uh, the uh, Again, from your history, we're watching Juan Soto have on paper this brilliant year, and you've seen every year by every Met hitter, every Piazza, every Olerud, every David Wright, every Carlos Beltran.
Yeah.
Where does this one fall in for you as in the Mets lineage?
Well, I think it's historic in every way. And also, the kid's 26 years old. I mean, this portends 4, 5 potentially similar, if not even somehow better years at this level. Maybe Darryl would agree with this. I don't know. I feel this is the kind of season offensively Darryl Strawberry should have had on a regular basis. And Darryl might be the first one to say, yeah, I agree, because he has, obviously grown so much since then and acknowledged so much of what could have and should have been. But for this kid to do what he's done in the sort of pantheon of great Mets seasons, I think this has a chance to surpass them all. I mean, he's walked 123 whatever times, and yet for a guy who's so often pitched around, he's 40, 100 plus. And the only thing I'll say about Soto projecting ahead is you may be looking at a guy who's going to be a DH in 2 or 3 years too. And I don't know if that factors, maybe there's a connection there too in the kind of deal they offer Pete, knowing that as Pete ages and perhaps the specter of a potential DH role for him is complicated by the possibility that they may need Soto to do that 3, 4 years down the road, whatever. But what he's doing right now is off the charts, in my opinion.
My last question will be on a different legendary Met, and that's you, Howie. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? And what do you see for the future? You're still as great as ever.
Well, that's very nice of you. I appreciate it. What I see for the future, God willing, health, I think, and we're all at that point. I mean, I'm 71 now, and I've seen a lot of broadcasters, just as we've all seen players, but I'll internalize it from my own community. I've seen a lot of broadcasters go longer than they should, and I know that Bob Costas says that as he approached 70, uh, kind of realized that there are some differences in how quickly the words come. And I just have taken to saying that the synapses don't fire quite as quickly as they used to. So you have to find a way to work around that. But without, being long-winded here, I'm just going year by year now. I hope and expect to be back next year. Um, I reserve the right to get down to Florida where I live when the season's over. And after a week or two, maybe reassess. I know my wife deserves to have her husband around a lot more than she has because you got to remember, I did hockey and baseball on a full season basis concurrently for about 12 years. I should have had my head examined for that. But, opportunities come about in this business, and I've been blessed to have some really good ones, and it's hard to say no. But, Barbara sacrificed way too much over the years. So I can tell you, I'm not going to do it much longer. I hope and expect to do it next year. But as I say, I'm going year to year, and I'm very sensitive to those synapses. And I've learned how to deal with it because you guys might have heard this story that Tom Seaver used to tell about warming up. This is when he was with the White Sox, warming up in the bullpen before a game. And he and Dave Duncan, the pitching coach, are walking back to the dugout. And Dunk says to Seaver, "You ain't got anything today." And Seaver said to him, "Hey, you know that, and I know that, but they don't know that," which is just Tom's way of saying, I can pitch around whatever I might not have today. And I think I've kind of learned to do that in the broadcast sense as well. And that's why I feel I've got at least another year in me. But we'll know. I'll have to find my Dave Duncan to tell me if I'm right or not.
Howie, as a way to wrap this up, I'm wondering again, you're modest. So when I say I wonder if you could speak for Met fans, I do think that there's not many people on the planet, you, Mike Vaccaro, Gary Cohn, like who could actually do this. What is the Met fan feeling as these 6 games, three in Chicago, three in Miami, are feeling? Is it utter despair? Is it optimism? What? Put us in the in the clothing of a Met fan at this moment.
The need to keep Pepto-Bismol by your side for the entirety of the week,
Yeah.
because whatever happens, it's not going to be easy. And there will be some turbulence within. And I think if it were an organization that had a larger portfolio of success, you'd feel differently. But given what we've talked about and some other things that didn't turn out all that well for Mets fans, I'm sure they're really, really nervous. But I'm going to offer this in closing. This is my way of trying to tell Met fans that this has a chance to work out really well. Because first off, I want to wish the both of you and everyone listening who celebrates a very, very happy New Year as the Jewish New Year begins at sundown Monday night. Now, it will be in the Jewish calendar the year 5786. So when the Mets take the field in Chicago on Tuesday night, they will do so as the 86 Mets. And we know that that tends to work out really well. So that's my message to Mets fans.
And that's a sign that your synapses are firing just fine, by the way, Howie Rose. And that we're glad you're still doing what you do great for all of us to listen to. And again, everyone who watches or listens to this should know on incredibly short notice, we reached out to Howie because we thought he'd be the perfect guest today. And John and I aren't often right, but we were right. You were the perfect guest today, Howie. And we thank you
Well,
so much for
I
joining.
appreciate I appreciate that, and you can understand how it's cathartic.
Yes. Thank you so much, Howie.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Howie.
John and I, of course, thank the great Howie Rose for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
I'm going to give an error, the obvious error to the team collapsing, maybe even worse than the Mets, the Tigers. It's hard to believe. I mean, they had the best record in the American League for a while. It feels like a Mets collapse from '07. They've lost six in a row now. They're still a game up, and they've got two out of their last six starts will be started by Tarek Skubal, friend of the show, and a great pitcher, more importantly. But they are in quite a collapse. They look dead on arrival to me. We'll see. They still got a game to go, and only one of those teams that's in that race is going to fall out. And Houston's got a ton of injuries, so maybe it's Houston and the Guardians. Who knows how the Guardians are doing this? So maybe they still make it, but this has been pretty awful in Detroit.
Yeah, I figure that both Detroit and Cleveland will make it because somehow the Yankees will end up playing two AL Central teams in the playoffs again this year, like they live under the lucky star.
Well, you know what? It's pretty lucky to play Houston right now, right? They don't have Hader or Al. Maybe, could you see Houston being the Yankees because they're Houston? I mean, at this point, uh, they're because due to their injuries, they're the worst team on paper.
Yeah, they're the zombie Astros. They're wearing their
Yeah,
uniforms, but it doesn't look anything like the last 10
yeah.
years. I'm going to give an error. I'm going to give it to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm going to give you a stat that I find staggering. The Pittsburgh Pirates have thrown more shutouts this year than
I
anyone in
saw
the major
that.
leagues at 19, and yet somehow have 67 wins and are 22 games under 500. The Pittsburgh Pirates have the guy who I think is going to cakewalk to the NL Cy Young this year. And
Yeah,
somehow, can I repeat this? There's 22 games under 500. Like at some point, if Paul Skeens played in the NBA, he already would have been asked to be traded. Like, why am I giving up my arm and body for a team trying this little or this inept, whatever combination you want, if you're the Pirates? You're either not trying or you're inept. I had a Pirate person during spring training kind of like bemoan to me, oh, you don't understand. How would we compete with the Dodgers and the Yankees? And I said, last I saw you were in the NL Central and you finished, this will be now 9 straight years behind the Brewers, who are the smallest market. Figure out a way to finish ahead of the Brewers before you start complaining about the coast. Okay. The Brewers figure out a way to finish ahead of the Cubs, who are a pretty big market team. The Brewers just won the division for a third straight year. I mean, if the Mets want to be encouraged by anything, they had won the Brewers before David Stearns showed up, had won three division titles. They've won five since Stearns when Stearns took over, and this is still his infrastructure. I mean, great for Matt Arnold and his group taking the handoff, but he put together a group there. Man, the Pirates need somebody like that. They are like Mike Trout just hit his 400th homer, and we've done a lot of conversations around like, hey, it feels empty because he's only been to the playoffs once. I'm afraid of Paul Skeens becoming the pitching Mike Trout if he sticks around in Pittsburgh too long.
right. Why? How is he going to stick around? I mean, he's
Yeah.
probably worth $50 million a year now. They don't pay. They haven't signed a multi-year deal since who was that Mets pitcher, Ivan Nova or something? That was like their last multi-year free agent. Was that his name? I don't
Yeah,
know.
Ivan Nova, Yankees, not Mets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Pirates. That was their last multi-year free agent. So I mean, they'll give it a shot, I guess. But I mean, he's a $50 million a year player at this point as a free agent. So they're not going to be able to buy out a free agent year unless they really go out of character. I will say they somehow. I mean, obviously they had some high draft choices, but they got some good players, right? Connor Griffin's one of the better prospects in baseball. I've got other pitchers who are pretty good who are up there right now. Obviously, they got the what is it, 18 or 19 shutouts. So, uh, you know. Uh, maybe we won't give them too much credit, but they may be pretty good next year. But you're right. They deserve it at this point. Yeah, it's like Steve Carlton won 27 games with the
Yeah.
worst team in the league. So Skeens wasn't able to do that. I think he won. Did he win 10 games? I think something like that.
He has a losing record, right?
I
It's
don't know.
oh,
What is his record? I don't know.
it was incredible. Like he had like a 500 record in games he's given up no or one or two runs. Like it was some incredible thing.
It's
And
like
like,
worse than DeGrom, right? It's
yeah,
it's like we never thought we saw that DeGrom thing again, right? Where he won the Cy Young going whatever 11-10 or something. Uh, you know, you're right. It's going to be a cakewalk. He's been brilliant,
yeah.
and yeah, you don't want to waste these years.
Already
Spend
two are wasted. Two's wasted already for a guy who throws this hard. There's Warren. There's
Well, I'll
a
give him a pass. Let's give him a pass on last year, right? I mean, he
yeah.
was a rookie. They just called him up. It wasn't. He didn't have a
Henry Davis, Tamar Johnson. You want me to keep going on the wasted high draft picks? Maybe to your point, Connor Griffin.
money. They need to spend some money, right? I
Yes.
mean, Tommy Pham's been everything you'd expect, right? But what would you expect, right? You need to get big time players there. I mean, he's done well but he's Tommy Pham at this point. He's 35 years old. You can't expect him to save the team, right?
Yeah.
Get more than eight. They had $8 million to spend, right? They tried to spend on Verdugo. That wasn't going to save the team. But how do you save your team on 8 million? We're covering two teams that spend over 300 million, right? The Pirates
Figure
make
out what
all
the
the money,
Brewers are doing and do it better. That's
right?
my
Well, yeah,
point.
not everyone
But
can do
they're
it
in the
quite that
Brewers
well. Give the
division.
Brewers credit, but they should do it better than they have been doing it. Yes.
The guy who does it great is Tommy Hogan, our producer. Thank you so much, Tommy. This was short notice again to get us up and running today. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, please rate and review us. It really does help. If you like the show, please download us, rate, review us, tell friends about us. John and I want to keep doing this. One of the ways is building up a following. So please help us. You could do that also by going to the New York Post Sports YouTube page and giving a view. And of course, by continuing to listen to the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.